Maya Johnson's hands tremble on the silver tray. The weight of the gumbo bowls, nothing compared to the eyes boring into her. Your stench is filthy, girl, Evelyn Hawthorne snaps, her manicured hands snapping up to cover her nose, voice slicing through the chatter of Savannah's elite. The Gala, held at the Hawthorne estate, hums with clinking glasses and sharp laughter. But Evelyn's words cut deeper, a blade aimed at Maya's core. At 27, Maya, a black server, pours her low-country heritage into every dish, her mother's gumbo recipe a defiant pulse of pride. Her white apron, crisp against her dark skin, feels like a target now, the small notebook tucked in its pocket, her dream of writing Southern folk tales, her only shield. Subscribe now to catch every pulse-pounding second of this heartwarming tale, and share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Stay glued. Her story flips everything upside down. Let me know if you want any tweaks to the intro or if you'd like me to proceed with another task, such as writing a specific scene, adding narration cues, or refining other video elements. Evelyn, 65, matriarch of the Hawthorne dynasty, stands tall in a cream silk dress, her gray eyes glinting with control. Her nose-wrinkling gesture isn't subtle, it's a performance, meant to pin Maya as an outsider in this gilded crowd. You're tainting our air, Evelyn hisses, her hands still clamped over her face, fingers splayed like a gatekeeper barring entry. Maya's jaw tightens, teeth grinding until her temples throb. She wants to hurl the tray, let the gumbo splash across Evelyn's pristine dress, but her mother's voice echoes. Stand tall, always. The crowd shifts, some whispering, others staring, their tailored suits and pearl necklaces a wall of judgment. A young guest, phone in hand, captures the moment, his thumb already hovering over a share button. You heard me, Evelyn cuts in before Maya can speak, her voice a whip. This isn't your place. The words land like blows, each one heavier, meant to crush. Maya's fingers curl around the tray's edge, knuckles whitening, her heartbeat a drum in her chest. She catches a glimpse of her reflection in the polished silver, a woman who's fought for every inch of respect, now reduced to a spectacle. Her notebook presses against her hip, a quiet vow of her worth, but the sting of Evelyn's words burns hotter. Step back, Evelyn orders, waving a hand as if shooing a pest. The crowd parts, leaving Maya exposed, a lone figure under the shadow of a Spanish moss-draped oak. A man in a seersucker suit mutters to his wife, "She doesn't belong here." His wife nods, her lips pursed, but a younger woman nearby hesitates, her eyes flicking to Maya with a flicker of doubt. Maya's chest heaves, her breath shallow, but she forces her spine straight. She won't crumble. Not here, not now. Evelyn steps closer, her perfume a cloying cloud, and leans in, voice low but venomous. Know your place, girl. The insult sears, a brand on Maya's pride, but her mother's gumbo, steaming on the tray, anchors her. It's more than food. It's her roots, her fight, her story. The phone-wielding guest uploads the clip, and murmurs ripple through the crowd, a chain reaction of whispers. Maya's ears catch fragments. Disgraceful. Too bold for a server. Her pulse races, but she locks eyes with Evelyn, refusing to blink. The matriarch's smirk falters for a split second, a crack in her armor, but she recovers, turning to the crowd with a practiced smile. Let's move on, she declares, dismissing Maya like dust. Maya's hands shake, but she holds the tray steady, her resolve a fire no insult can douse. She steps back, not in defeat, but to regroup, her notebook a silent promise of retribution. The oak looms above, its moss swaying, whispering of a storm yet to break. Maya Johnson's feet carry her to the edge of the Hawthorne Gala, away from Evelyn's venomous words, her pulse hammering like a war drum. The silver tray, still clutched in her hands, trembles with the weight of her mother's gumbo, each bowl a piece of her low-country soul. Her jaw clenches, teeth grinding so hard her temples pulse, but she won't let tears fall, not here, not under the eyes of Savannah's elite. Evelyn's insult, "Your stench is filthy, girl," echoes in her skull, a blade twisting deeper with every step. The crowd's whispers chase her, their tailored suits and glittering jewels a blur of judgment. But her white apron, stained with a speck of gumbo, feels like armor. Tucked in its pocket, her notebook of Southern folk tales presses against her hip, a lifeline to her mother's voice. You are enough. She stops near a shadowed corner of the garden, the Spanish moss-draped oak looming overhead, its branches a silent witness. Know your place, Evelyn had sneered, her hand still raised to her nose, a gesture that branded Maya as less than human. The memory ignites a fire in her chest, her breath hitching, but she forces it steady. I belong here, she whispers to herself, voice low, a vow carved from rage and pride. Her fingers brush the notebook, its worn pages holding stories of ancestors who endured worse, chains, whips, erasure, and still rose. She won't break, not for Evelyn, not for anyone. A guest, a woman in a pearl-encrusted dress, brushes past, muttering, "She should have stayed in the kitchen." The words sting, but Maya's eyes blaze, locking onto the woman's back. She wants to shout, to demand respect, but her mother taught her better. Words cut deeper when they're sharp and true. She straightens, shoulders squared, and turns to face the crowd, her dark eyes sweeping over them like a challenge. My heritage isn't dirty, she says, voice steady, slicing through the hum of chatter. It's the blood in Savannah's veins. The words land like a thrown gauntlet, silencing a cluster of guests nearby. A young man, phone still in hand from filming Evelyn's attack, pauses, his thumb frozen over the screen, eyes wide with surprise. Evelyn, watching from the center of the gala, stiffens, her cream silk dress catching the light as her smirk fades. Don't speak out of turn, she snaps, voice a razor, cutting off Maya's next breath. But Maya's lips curl, not into a smile, but a defiance that burns. I'm not your servant, Mrs. Hawthorne, she fires back, each syllable a spark. I'm Maya Johnson, and my story's worth more than your name. The crowd gasps, a ripple of shock spreading, some clutching their glasses tighter, others leaning closer, caught by her fire. The young man's phone tilts, capturing every word, his fingers itching to share. Maya's heart pounds, her hands steadying the tray as if it's her anchor. The notebook in her pocket feels heavier, its stories urging her to stand taller. She steps forward, refusing to shrink, her apron a banner of her resolve. Evelyn's eyes narrow, a predator sensing a fight, but Maya meets her gaze, unyielding. You can't erase me, she says, voice low but thunderous, a promise to herself and the ancestors in her tales. The crowd shifts, some nodding, others whispering, the air thick with tension. The young man uploads the clip, and the murmurs grow louder, a spark ready to ignite. Maya turns, tray still in hand, and walks toward the kitchen, her steps deliberate, each one a reclaiming of her space. The oak's moss sways above, a silent cheer for her defiance. But as she moves, a folded paper slips from a passing server's tray, landing at her feet, its edge marked with a single word, truth. Her pulse spikes, fingers itching to grab it, sensing a storm brewing beyond Evelyn's cruelty. Evelyn Hawthorne's fingers tighten around her crystal flute, the champagne untouched, her gray eyes darting across the gala's crowd. Maya's words, my story's worth more than your name, echo like a slap, lingering in the air as guests murmur, their glances sharp with curiosity. Evelyn's cream silk dress feels too tight, her chest constricting as she forces a smile, her polished facade cracking. She strides to the center of the Hawthorne Estates lawn, where the elite of Savannah clink glasses, their tailored suits and diamond earrings glinting under the soft glow of string lights. Her nose-wrinkling insult, calling Maya filthy, was meant to crush, but Maya's defiance has turned heads, and Evelyn feels the weight of those eyes judging her. A guest, a local chef with a grizzled beard, approaches, his voice gruff but earnest. That gumbo, he says, nodding toward the table where Maya's bowls sit, steaming with low-country soul. It's the best thing here, pure Savannah. Evelyn's lips purse, her knuckles whitening on the flute. The praise stings, a jab at her calculated attack on Maya. She waves him off, her hands slicing the air. It's just food, she snaps, but her voice wavers, betraying a flicker of doubt. The chef shrugs, his eyes narrowing, and walks away, leaving Evelyn alone with the hum of the crowd. Her pulse quickens, her teeth grinding as she scans the faces. Some whisper, others sip their drinks, but all seem to weigh her actions. She steps toward the gumbo table, her heels clicking like a metronome, and stares at the bowls. The rich, earthy scent hits her, a reminder of Maya's heritage, the one she tried to erase. Her stomach twists, not with hunger, but with unease. She'd expected compliance, not resistance, and certainly not applause for a server's dish. A young woman in a sequined dress leans over, taking a bowl, and murmurs to her friend, "This is incredible. Who made it?" Evelyn's jaw clenches, her fingers itching to snatch the bowl away, but she freezes as the woman adds, "They said it's the black girl's recipe. She's got guts." The words burn, a quiet rebellion against Evelyn's control, and her breath catches, her facade teetering. A server, rushing past with a tray, stumbles, and a folded paper flutters to the ground near Evelyn's feet. She snatches it up, her nails digging into the edges, expecting a stray napkin. Instead, scrawled in sharp ink, is a single word: truth. Her pulse spikes, her eyes darting to the crowd, searching for the source. "Who dropped this?" she demands, voice low but sharp, cutting through the nearby chatter. The server shrugs, scurrying off, leaving Evelyn clutching the note. Her mind races. Truth? About what? The paper feels heavy, a splinter in her polished world, hinting at something buried, something tied to her family's legacy. She tucks it into her clutch, her fingers trembling, but her face hardens, refusing to show weakness. The crowd's murmurs grow, a few guests glancing at their phones, where Maya's defiant words are already spreading through whispered gossip. Evelyn's throat tightens, her teeth pressing so hard her jaw aches. She'd meant to bury Maya, but the girl's fire has sparked something else, a crack in the Hawthorne name. She turns, her eyes scanning for Maya, who's vanished into the kitchen, her absence louder than her presence. The chef's praise, the note, the crowd's shifting loyalty, they claw at Evelyn's control, planting a seed of regret she can't shake. She steps forward, her heels sinking into the grass, determined to regain her grip. But the paper in her clutch burns like a fuse, promising secrets she can't yet face. "You think you can shame me, girl?" Evelyn Hawthorne's voice cuts like a blade, her gray eyes blazing as she corners Maya Johnson in the Hawthorne estate's bustling kitchen. The clatter of dishes and the hum of servers fade under her presence, her cream silk dress a stark contrast to Maya's white apron, now flecked with gumbo stains. Evelyn's insult at the gala, covering her nose, calling Maya filthy, still burns, amplified by the whispers of Savannah's elite and the photo snapped by a guest. The mysterious note, truth, tucked in Evelyn's clutch, gnaws at her, a splinter in her control. Her fingers grip the countertop, nails digging into the marble, as she fights the unease sparked by the chef's praise for Maya's gumbo and the crowd's shifting glances. Maya 27 stands firm, her hands steady on a stack of plates, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ache. Her notebook of Southern folk tales presses against her hip, a quiet anchor to her pride. "I don't want your shame, Mrs. Hawthorne," she fires back, her voice low, sharp, a dagger of defiance. "I want respect." Evelyn's lips twist, her hands slashing the air to silence Maya. "Respect is earned," she snaps, cutting her off. "You're a server, not family." The words sting, but Maya's eyes don't waver, her dark gaze locking onto Evelyn's, a challenge that makes the matriarch's pulse spike. The kitchen staff pause, their glances darting, sensing the storm. Evelyn steps closer, her perfume a suffocating cloud, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You've stirred trouble," she says, her fingers twitching toward her clutch, where the note lies. "That gumbo nonsense. People are talking." Maya's chest tightens, her breath hitching, but she holds her ground, her fingers brushing the notebook. "Good," she retorts, her voice a spark. "Let them talk about my heritage." Evelyn's face hardens, her teeth grinding, but the chef's words, pure Savannah, echo in her mind, a crack in her certainty. She'd meant to crush Maya, but the girl's fire is turning heads and the note's warning, truth, claws at her thoughts. She pivots, her heels clicking toward the kitchen door, but pauses, her hand hovering over the handle. "Stay out of my way," she warns, her voice a low growl, but her eyes flicker with doubt. Maya doesn't flinch, her hands stacking plates with deliberate force, each clink a rebellion. "I'm not hiding," she says, her tone cutting, her eyes burning with the memory of her mother's tales. Stories of ancestors who faced worse and stood taller. Evelyn's fingers tighten on her clutch, the note's weight pulling at her. She storms out, her silk dress swishing, but her steps falter as she overhears a guest outside, a woman in pearls, say, "That server's dish outshines everything here." Evelyn's throat constricts, her pulse racing as she slips into the estate's library, seeking solitude. She pulls the note from her clutch, staring at the scrawled truth, her nails biting into her palm. Her mind races. What truth? She grabs a leather-bound book on Savannah history from a shelf, flipping through it with trembling hands, her eyes scanning for answers. A faded note slips out, mentioning a land deal tied to the Hawthorne name, dated decades ago. Her breath catches, her heart pounding as she shoves it back, refusing to face it. But the chef's praise, the crowd's murmurs, and Maya's unyielding defiance gnaw at her, a chain of cracks in her iron grip. She heads back toward the gala, her heels echoing in the hall, determined to regain control. But as she passes a mirror, her reflection shows a woman unraveling, her gray eyes haunted by the note's promise. Maya's words, "My story's worth more than your name," ring in her ears, a challenge she can't ignore. She clenches her fists, her resolve hardening, but the library's shadows linger, whispering of secrets buried in the Hawthorne legacy, secrets that could burn her world to ash. "You think I'll break, Mrs. Hawthorne?" Maya Johnson mutters under her breath, her voice a low growl as she shoves a stack of plates into the kitchen sink. Evelyn's half-hearted apology, "I may have been too harsh," still burns, a hollow gesture that tried to cage her spirit. Her white apron, flecked with gumbo stains, clings to her frame, a badge of her fight at the Hawthorne Gala. At 27, Maya's hands move with purpose, scrubbing dishes with fierce precision, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth pulse with pain. The notebook in her apron pocket, filled with Southern folk tales, presses against her hip, a lifeline to her mother's voice. "Your story is your strength." Evelyn's insult, covering her nose, calling Maya filthy, echoes, but Maya's resolve is iron, forged in the fire of her low-country roots. She pauses, her fingers gripping the sink's edge, knuckles whitening. The kitchen buzzes with servers rushing past, their trays clattering, but Maya's world narrows to the weight of her notebook. She pulls it out, flipping to a tale about a woman who outwitted a storm, her mother's words inked in her own hand. Her chest heaves, her breath steadying as she reads silently, each line a spark reigniting her fire. "I'm still here," she whispers, her voice a vow, her dark eyes blazing with defiance. She won't let Evelyn's cruelty, or the crowd's judging stares, erase her. Her dream of writing a book, of sharing her ancestors' stories, fuels her, a flame no matriarch can douse. A young server, barely 20, stumbles nearby, dropping a glass that shatters on the tile. His face pales, his hands shaking as he mutters, "They'll fire me." Maya kneels beside him, her apron brushing the floor, and grabs a rag. "Breathe," she says, her voice firm but kind, cutting through his panic. "You're bigger than one mistake." She hands him the rag, guiding his trembling hands to clean the shards. "My mom used to say," she adds, her lips curling into a faint smile, "a broken glass is just a story waiting to be told." The boy's eyes widen, his shoulders easing, and he nods, a flicker of gratitude breaking through his fear. Maya's heart lifts, her own pain easing as she helps him, her strength a beacon in the chaos. Footsteps approach, and James Hawthorne, 30, leans against the kitchen doorway, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his gaze locked on Maya. "You're something else," he says, his voice low, carrying a warmth that cuts through the clatter. Maya's pulse skips, her fingers tightening on the rag. "Just doing my job," she snaps, her tone sharp, wary of his intentions. She's seen him at past galas, his easy charm masking a restlessness she can't place. Not just that, he counters, stepping closer, his eyes tracing her face. You stood up to her. That takes guts. Maya's jaw tightens, her teeth grinding, unsure if he's an ally or another Hawthorne trap. Guts don't pay my bills, she fires back, her voice a blade, but her eyes flicker with curiosity. James hesitates, his hand brushing his pocket, where his phone holds recordings of Evelyn's venomous words. I've been watching her, he says, his voice dropping, a secret barely contained. She's not as untouchable as she thinks. Maya's breath catches, her fingers brushing her notebook, sensing a shift. She wants to press him, to demand answers, but another server interrupts, shouting for help with a spilled tray. Maya moves to assist, her steps quick, her apron swinging, but James's words linger, a spark in her mind. As she helps the server, her eyes dart to a crumpled paper on the floor, half hidden under a counter, its edge marked with faded ink. Land debt. Her pulse spikes, her fingers itching to grab it, a new thread in the unraveling tapestry of the Hawthorne legacy. You don't get to play victim, girl, Evelyn Hawthorne snaps, her voice a whip as she storms into the kitchen, her cream silk dress swishing like a blade. Maya Johnson, 27, freezes mid-step, her white apron streaked with gumbo, her hands still gripping a rag from helping a young server. Evelyn's earlier insult, covering her nose, calling Maya filthy, burns fresh, and her half-hearted apology in the library only sharpened the sting. Now her gray eyes blaze, but a flicker of unease betrays her, sparked by the truth note and a faded land deal record she found. Maya's jaw clenches, teeth grinding until her temples throb, her notebook of Southern folk tales pressing against her hip, a shield of her low-country pride. I'm not your victim, Maya fires back, her voice low, sharp, cutting through the kitchen's clatter. Her dark eyes lock onto Evelyn's, unyielding, her fingers tightening on the rag until her knuckles bleach. You humiliated me. Own it. Evelyn's lips twist, her hands slashing the air to silence her. Enough, she hisses, cutting Maya off. I spoke too harshly. That's all you'll get. The words are a grudging concession, but Maya's chest heaves, her breath hot with defiance. She steps forward, closing the gap, her apron a banner of her fight. That's not enough, she says, each syllable a spark. You want forgiveness? Let me speak at your gala. Let my story be heard. Evelyn's face hardens, her nails digging into her palms, her pulse spiking at the audacity. Speak? She scoffs, her voice a razor. You're a server, not a guest. But Maya doesn't flinch, her eyes burning, her mother's tales fueling her resolve. I'm Maya Johnson, she says, her voice thunderous, and my stories are worth more than your guest list. The kitchen staff pause, their glances darting, caught by the clash. Evelyn's breath catches, her teeth grinding, the truth note in her clutch a weight she can't ignore. The chef's praise for Maya's gumbo and the crowd's murmurs gnaw at her, a chain of doubts cracking her control. Fine, she snaps, her voice tight, a reluctant surrender. One story. Don't embarrass me. Maya's lips curl, not a smile but a challenge, her fingers brushing her notebook, its pages heavy with her ancestors' strength. I'll tell a truth you can't silence, she says, her tone cutting, a vow that makes Evelyn's eyes narrow. The matriarch turns to leave, her heels clicking, but pauses, her hand clutching her purse. Don't push me, she warns, her voice low, a threat laced with fear. Maya holds her gaze, her heart pounding, her resolve iron. She won't bend. Not now, not ever. The kitchen door swings shut behind Evelyn, leaving a tense silence, the staff resuming their tasks with hurried glances. Maya slips her hand into her apron, pulling out the crumpled paper she found earlier, marked land debt. Her pulse spikes, her fingers trembling as she unfolds it. Scrawled in faded ink is a note. Hawthorne land built on stolen ground. Check the old ledgers. Her breath hitches, her mind racing. Stolen ground? The words tie to the truth note Evelyn found. A thread of something darker, something buried in the Hawthorne legacy. She tucks the paper back, her eyes darting to the door where James Hawthorne lingers, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder, his gaze intense. "You okay?" he asks, his voice low, a warmth cutting through her tension. "Not yet," she says, her tone sharp but curious, sensing he knows more than he lets on. James steps closer, his hand brushing his pocket, where his phone holds recordings of Evelyn's venom. "I've got something on her," he says, his voice a whisper, a secret ready to spill. "You're not alone." Maya's heart skips, her fingers tightening on her notebook, the land debt note burning in her mind. She wants to press him, to unravel his words, but a server calls for her, pulling her back to the Gala's chaos. She moves, her steps deliberate, her apron swinging, but the note's promise lingers, a fuse lit in the shadows of the Hawthorne estate, ready to explode. "You're a liar stirring up trouble," Lillian Hawthorne hisses, her voice a venomous slash as she corners Maya Johnson in a dimly lit hallway of the Hawthorne estate. The Gala's chatter hums faintly beyond the walls, but Lillian's presence, sharp as a blade, drowns it out. At 45, Evelyn's cousin and a board member of the Hawthorne empire, Lillian's tailored black dress clings to her frame, her hazel eyes glinting with malice. Maya, 27, grips her white apron, the notebook of Southern folktales in her pocket a steady weight against her hip. Evelyn's earlier insult, covering her nose, calling Maya filthy, still sears, and the land debt note Maya found, hinting at stolen ground, burns in her mind. Lillian's sudden attack, sparked by overhearing Maya's talk with James about the note, is a new threat, her words slicing deeper than Evelyn's. "You think you can waltz in here with your stories?" Lillian snaps, stepping closer, her manicured nails jabbing the air. Maya's jaw clenches, teeth grinding until her temples throb, her pulse racing from the Gala's earlier tensions. "I'm not here to play games," Maya fires back, her voice low, cutting, her dark eyes locking onto Lillian's. "I'm telling the truth." Lillian's lips twist, her hand slashing to cut Maya off. "Truth?" she scoffs, her voice a whip. "You're a server, nothing more. Keep your nose out of our business." The words sting, echoing Evelyn's cruelty, but Maya's chest heaves, her breath hot with defiance. Her fingers brush the notebook, its tales of low-country resilience fueling her fire. Lillian leans in, her perfume sharp, her voice dropping to a hiss. "I heard you and James," she says, her eyes narrowing, a predator sensing blood, "poking into family matters. Stop, or you'll regret it." Maya's heart pounds, her knuckles whitening as she grips her apron, the land debt note's words. Hawthorne land built on stolen ground, flashing in her mind. She steps forward, refusing to shrink, her voice steady. "I'm not scared of you," she says, each syllable a spark. "Your family's secrets don't own me." Lillian's face contorts, her teeth grinding, her control fraying. "You're nothing," she spits, cutting Maya off again. "A nobody trying to ruin us." The hallway feels tighter, the air thick with tension. Maya's pulse spikes, her mind racing to the note in James's whispered promise. I've got something on her. She wants to shove past Lillian, to find James and unravel the truth. But Lillian steps closer, her voice a low growl. "Stay away from him," she warns, her finger jabbing at Maya's chest. "He's a Hawthorne. You're just help." The jab lands like a punch, but Maya's eyes blaze, her mother's tales echoing. "Stand tall, always." "I'm Maya Johnson," she says, her voice thunderous, "and I'm more than your insults." Lillian's smirk falters, her hand dropping, but her eyes burn with a new resolve, a threat unspoken. A server rushes past, nearly knocking into Lillian, who snaps, "Watch it!" The distraction gives Maya a moment to breathe, her fingers slipping into her apron, brushing the land debt note. Lillian notices, her gaze sharpening, her voice slicing again. "What's that?" she demands, reaching for Maya's pocket. Maya jerks back, her heart slamming against her ribs, her hands shielding the note. "None of your business," she says, her tone a blade, her eyes daring Lillian to push further. Lillian's lips purse, her nails digging into her palms, but she steps back, her heels clicking as she turns. "You'll learn your place," she says, her voice a venomous promise, leaving the air heavy with menace. Maya exhales, her breath shaky, her fingers trembling as she clutches the note. Lillian's threat, tied to the land debt mystery, feels like a noose tightening. She glances down the hallway, where James's silhouette lingers near the Gala's entrance, his phone in hand, his eyes searching for her. Her pulse quickens, sensing he holds the key to the secrets Lillian guards. But as she steps toward him, a faint rustle catches her ear. A hidden ledger, tucked behind a painting, its corner peeking out, promising answers that could shatter the Hawthorne empire. "You're digging your own grave, Maya." Lillian Hawthorne's voice slices through the hallway, her hazel eyes blazing as she catches Maya Johnson reaching for the hidden ledger behind the painting. The Gala's distant hum of Savannah's elite fades, leaving only the weight of Lillian's threat from moments ago. "You'll learn your place," and the land debt note burning in Maya's apron pocket. At 27, Maya's white apron, flecked with gumbo stains, clings to her frame, her notebook of Southern folk tales a steady anchor against her hip. Her jaw clenches, teeth grinding until her temples pulse, her pulse hammering from Lillian's venom and the ledger's promise of truth. She jerks her hand back, her fingers trembling, but her dark eyes lock onto Lillian's, unyielding. "Don't touch what's not yours," Maya snaps, her voice low, sharp, a dagger of defiance. Lillian's lips twist, her hands slashing the air to silence her. "You're a thief, snooping in our house," she hisses, stepping closer, her black dress a shadow of menace. Maya's chest heaves, her breath hot with rage, but she holds her ground, her fingers brushing the notebook, its tales of low-country resilience fueling her fire. "I'm finding the truth," she fires back, her tone cutting, "and you can't stop me." Lillian's face contorts, her nails digging into her palms, her voice a whip. "Truth? You're a server, not a detective." The words sting, echoing Evelyn's filthy insult, but Maya's heart pounds, her resolve iron. Footsteps echo and James Hawthorne, 30, bursts into the hallway, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his eyes blazing with urgency. "Back off, Lillian," he says, his voice a low growl cutting through the tension. Lillian spins, her gaze sharpening on her cousin. "You're with her?" She spits, her finger jabbing at Maya. "She's poison." James steps between them, his shoulders squared, his hand brushing his pocket, where his phone holds recordings of Evelyn's venom, and now Lillian's. "She's more family than you," he says, his tone a blade, his eyes locked on Maya's, a spark of something deeper flashing. Maya's pulse skips, her fingers tightening on the notebook, sensing an ally but wary of his motives. "Show me," Maya says, her voice steady, nodding toward the ledger. Lillian lunges, her hand grabbing for it, but James blocks her, his arm a barrier. "Enough," he snaps, his voice thunderous, shoving Lillian back. "We're done hiding." Lillian's eyes narrow, her teeth grinding, but she steps back, her heels clicking, her voice a venomous hiss. "You'll ruin us," she says, storming off, leaving the air thick with menace. Maya's breath catches, her fingers snatching the ledger, its leather cover worn, its pages heavy with secrets. She flips it open, her eyes scanning faded ink. Dates, names, land deals from the 1950s, tied to the Hawthorne name. Her heart slams against her ribs, the land debt note's words, Hawthorne land built on stolen ground, coming alive. "We need more," James says, his voice urgent, his hand brushing Maya's arm, a touch that sends a jolt through her. She nods, her jaw clenching, her mind racing to the note's hint. "Check the old ledgers." "Savannah Historical Society," she says, her tone sharp, a plan forming. They slip out of the estate, dodging Gala guests, their steps quick, driven by the ledger's weight. At the Society's library, a dusty archive smells of old paper, but Maya's focus is razor sharp. She and James pore over records, her fingers trembling as she finds a map, its lines marking a low-country plot, her family's land, stolen by the Hawthornes through forged deeds. "This was my mother's," she whispers, her voice breaking, her eyes blazing with pain and purpose. James pulls out his phone, revealing a recording of Lillian from a past event, muttering about keeping the land deals quiet. "She's in on it," he says, his voice low, his eyes meeting Maya's, a shared fire igniting. Maya's chest tightens, her teeth grinding as she pieces it together. Lillian's wealth, tied to her board position, comes from that stolen land. My ancestors built that ground, she says, her voice a spark, her notebook open to a tale of justice, her mother's words urging her on. They find another document, a letter from Evelyn's father, admitting to unfair dealings with black families. Maya's pulse spikes, her fingers clutching the letter, its ink a confession of theft. A librarian, an older woman with sharp eyes, approaches, her voice low. "You're stirring ghosts," she says, handing them a faded photo of the stolen plot, showing Maya's great-grandparents working the land. Maya's breath hitches, her heart pounding, the photo tying her blood to the truth. "We're not stopping," James says, his tone fierce, his hand brushing Maya's a quiet vow. Lillian's threat, "You'll ruin us," echoes, but Maya's resolve hardens, her notebook a weapon, its stories a call to fight. As they leave, a shadow moves in the archive's corner, a figure watching, their face hidden, clutching a file marked Hawthorne Secrets, a new threat lurking in the silence. "You're tearing this family apart!" Lillian Hawthorne's voice slices through the silence, her hazel eyes blazing as she intercepts Maya Johnson and James Hawthorne in the Hawthorne Estates archive room. The Gala's distant hum fades, replaced by the weight of the land debt note in the map Maya clutches, proof her family's low-country land was stolen by the Hawthornes. At 27, Maya's white apron hangs loose, her notebook of Southern folk tales a steady weight in her pocket, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ache. Lillian's earlier threat, "You'll ruin us," burns fresh, and the shadowy figure they glimpsed at the Historical Society, clutching a file marked Hawthorne Secrets, looms in Maya's mind. Her pulse hammers, her fingers gripping the map, its lines tying her blood to the truth. "You stole my family's land," Maya fires back, her voice low, sharp, a dagger of accusation. Lillian's lips twist, her hands slashing the air to cut her off. "Lies," she snaps, her voice a whip, stepping closer, her black dress a shadow of menace. "You're a nobody with a grudge." Maya's chest heaves, her breath hot with rage, but she holds the map higher, its faded ink a testament to her ancestors' loss. "This says different," she says, her tone thunderous, her dark eyes boring into Lillian's. James, 30, steps forward, his suit rumpled, his phone in hand, its recordings of Lillian's mutterings. "Keep the land deals quiet," a loaded weapon. "She's right," he says, his voice a growl, cutting through Lillian's sneer. "Your secrets are done." Lillian lunges, her nails clawing for the map, but Maya jerks back, her heart slamming against her ribs. "Don't touch it," she warns, her voice a spark, her fingers trembling but firm. Lillian's face contorts, her teeth grinding, her control fraying. "You'll pay for this," she hisses, her eyes darting to a locked cabinet in the corner, its brass handle glinting. James follows her gaze, his pulse spiking, and yanks the cabinet open, revealing a leather-bound ledger, its pages yellowed, marked with Hawthorne Land Acquisitions. Maya's breath catches, her fingers flipping through it, landing on a 1950s entry, Johnson Land, acquired through coercion. Her heart stops, the name, her family's, etched in cold ink, proof the Hawthornes built their empire on theft. "Lillian, you knew," James says, his voice raw, his eyes blazing with betrayal. Lillian's lips quiver, her hands clenching, but she snaps, "You're a traitor," cutting him off. Maya's eyes burn, her mother's tales of resilience echoing, "Fight for what's yours." "This was my great-grandparents' home," she says, her voice breaking but fierce, holding up the ledger. "You profited from their pain." Lillian's face pales, her nails digging into her palms, but she lunges again, shoving Maya against the cabinet. "Stop this," she screams, her voice cracking, a desperate plea to bury the truth. James pulls her back, his grip iron, his voice a blade. "It's over," he says, his eyes locked on Maya's, a shared fire igniting. Maya's hands shake, clutching the ledger, its weight a chain to her ancestors' stolen legacy. Her pulse races, her mind reeling, Lillian's wealth, her board position, all tied to this theft. "You can't hide this," she says, her voice a vow, her notebook's tales urging her on. Lillian stumbles back, her breath ragged, her eyes darting to the door, where a shadow shifts, a figure watching, their silhouette clutching the Hawthorne Secrets file from the Historical Society. Maya's heart lurches, her fingers tightening on the ledger, sensing the truth is only half unearthed, a deeper betrayal waiting to surface, ready to ignite the Gala into chaos. "You're a dead woman, Maya," Lillian Hawthorne snarls, her voice a venomous slash as she slams the archive room door shut, trapping Maya Johnson and James Hawthorne inside. The lock clicks, a sound sharp as a gunshot, cutting off the distant hum of the Hawthorne Gala. Lillian's black dress clings to her frame, her hazel eyes blazing with desperation. Her role in the family's land theft, stolen from Maya's ancestors, exposed by the ledger Maya clutches. At 27, Maya's white apron, stained with gumbo, hangs loose, her notebook of Southern folktales pressing against her hip, a lifeline to her low-country pride. Her jaw clenches, teeth grinding until her temples throb, her pulse hammering from the truth. The Hawthornes built their empire on her great-grandparents' stolen land. Lillian's earlier threat, "You'll pay for this," burns fresh, and the shadowy figure from the Historical Society, clutching a Hawthorne Secrets file, looms in Maya's mind. "You can't bury this," Maya fires back, her voice low, sharp, a dagger of defiance, her fingers tightening on the ledger, its pages heavy with proof. Lillian's lips twist, her hands slashing the air to silence her. "Shut up," she snaps, her voice a whip, yanking a lighter from her purse, its flame flickering as she holds it near a stack of old files. "This ends now." Maya's chest heaves, her breath hot with rage, but she steps forward, her dark eyes boring into Lillian's. "Burn it, and you burn yourself," she says, her tone thunderous, her mother's tales of resilience echoing in her skull. James, 30, lunges for the lighter, his suit rumpled, his eyes blazing with fury. "You're done, Lillian," he says, his voice a growl. But Lillian shoves him back, her nails clawing at his arm. "You traitor!" Lillian screams, her voice cracking, her lighter sparking as she tosses it onto the files. Flames lick the edges, smoke curling, a choking haze filling the room. Maya's heart slams against her ribs, her pulse spiking as she grabs the ledger, shielding it with her body. "We're getting out," she says, her voice a spark, her eyes scanning for escape. Lillian laughs, a jagged sound, her hands slamming the cabinet shut. "You're trapped," she hisses, cutting Maya off, her eyes glinting with malice. "No one will believe a server." Maya's teeth grind, her fingers trembling but firm, the notebook in her pocket urging her on. She remembers a tale her mother told about a woman who outsmarted fire, and her mind races, spotting a rusty vent in the corner. "Move!" Maya shouts, shoving James toward the vent, her apron swinging as she kicks at the grate, her foot aching with each blow. Lillian lunges, grabbing Maya's arm, her nails digging in, drawing blood. "You're nothing!" she spits, her voice a venomous slash. Maya twists free, her elbow slamming into Lillian's chest, sending her stumbling. "I'm everything you stole," Maya says, her voice breaking but fierce, her eyes blazing through the smoke. James pries the vent open, his hands bleeding, his breath ragged. "Go!" he yells, his voice raw, pushing Maya toward the opening. The flames spread, crackling, the heat searing Maya's skin, but she crawls through, the ledger clutched tight, her notebook a steady weight. They tumble into a dark passage, coughing, the smoke chasing them. Maya's heart pounds, her fingers gripping the ledger, its truth her weapon. "She'll pay," she says, her voice a vow, her eyes meeting James's, a shared fire igniting. He nods, his hand brushing hers, a touch that steadies her. "I've got her on tape," he says, his voice low, his phone holding Lillian's confession from earlier. Maya's pulse quickens, her mind flashing to the shadowy figure. Their Hawthorne Secrets file a missing piece. They stumble toward the Gala's light, their steps quick, but a creak behind them stops Maya cold. A door in the passage opens, revealing a glint of steel, a new threat waiting to strike. "You'll never outrun me!" Lillian Hawthorne's voice echoes through the dark passage, her words a venomous slash as Maya Johnson and James Hawthorne scrambled toward the faint glow of the Hawthorne Gala. The glint of steel from a hidden figure in the passage. Clutching a knife, their face obscured, sends Maya's pulse hammering, her white apron, stained with gumbo, catching on the rough walls. At 27, her notebook of Southern folk tales presses against her hip, a lifeline to her low-country pride, while the ledger of stolen land, clutched tight, burns with the truth of her ancestors' loss. Lillian's fire in the archive room, meant to destroy evidence of the Hawthorne land theft, still crackles behind them, smoke stinging Maya's lungs. Her jaw clenches, teeth grinding until her temples throb, her heart pounding from the narrow escape. "Keep moving," Maya snaps, her voice low, sharp, a dagger of urgency as she shoves James forward, her hands trembling but firm on the ledger. Lillian's scream, "You're nothing!" rings in her ears, but Maya's resolve is iron, fueled by her mother's tales of resilience. James, 30, stumbles, his suit torn, his hand bleeding from prying open the vent, his phone gripping recordings of Lillian's confession. "She's behind us," he says, his voice a growl, cutting through the passage's damp air. Maya's eyes dart back, catching a shadow moving, the steel glinting again. "Not for long," she fires back, her tone thunderous, her fingers brushing the notebook, its stories urging her to fight. They burst into a storage room, crates of old files stacked high. The Galas hum louder now. Maya's chest heaves, her breath ragged, but she dives for a crate, ripping it open, her fingers tearing through papers. "Find it," she says, her voice a spark, her eyes scanning for the Hawthorne Secrets file glimpsed at the Historical Society. James kneels beside her, his hands shaking, pulling out a yellowed folder. "Here," he says, his voice raw, flipping it open to reveal a 1950s contract signed by Evelyn's father, admitting to coercing black families, including Maya's, out of their land. Maya's heart stops, her fingers trembling as she reads her great-grandparents' names, inked in betrayal. "This is it," she whispers, her voice breaking, her eyes blazing with pain and purpose. Lillian's footsteps echo closer, her voice slicing through. "You're dead," she screams, her knife glinting as she charges into the room, her black dress a shadow of rage. Maya ducks, her body slamming behind a crate, the ledger clutched to her chest. "You stole everything!" Maya shouts, her voice a vow, cutting through Lillian's advance. James lunges, grabbing Lillian's wrist, twisting the knife free, his arms straining, his breath ragged. "Stop this," he snaps, his voice thunderous, shoving her back. Lillian stumbles, her nails clawing at the air, her eyes wild. "You're betraying your blood," she spits, cutting him off, her voice cracking with desperation. Maya scrambles to another crate, her hands tearing through files, her pulse spiking as she finds a grainy photo. Her great-grandparents, working the stolen low-country plot, their faces etched with labor and pride. "This was theirs," she says, her voice fierce, holding the photo high, her eyes boring into Lillian's. The older woman's face pales, her teeth grinding, but she lunges again, knocking the photo from Maya's hand. "It's ours," Lillian screams, her voice a jagged blade, but Maya dives, snatching it back, her knuckles whitening. James pulls his phone, hitting play on a recording. Lillian's voice, clear, admitting, "The land deals stay buried, or we lose everything." The sound stops Lillian cold, her breath hitching, her hands trembling. "We've got you," James says, his voice low, his eyes locked on Maya's, a shared fire igniting. Maya's heart pounds, her fingers clutching the photo, ledger and notebook, each a piece of her fight. She remembers a tale her mother told, about a woman who turned truth into a weapon, and her resolve hardens. "You can't hide this," she says, her voice a spark, her eyes daring Lillian to move. The older woman's face contorts, her nails digging into her palms, but she backs toward the door, her voice a hiss. "This isn't over," she warns, slipping into the Gala's crowd, leaving the air thick with menace. Maya's breath steadies, her hands shaking but firm, the evidence a burning weight. She glances at James, his hand brushing hers, a touch that steadies her. "We need one more piece," she says, her tone sharp, her mind racing to the shadowy figure from the passage. They move toward the Gala, their steps quick, but a faint click stops them. A hidden safe, cracked open in the corner, its contents spilling a single letter, sealed with the hawthorn crest, promising a final truth that could shatter everything. "You're finished, Lillian." Maya Johnson's voice cuts like a blade, her words ringing out as she storms onto the gala's main stage, the ledger of stolen land clutched in her hands. The Hawthorne Estates crowd falls silent, their glasses frozen mid-clink, eyes locked on the 27-year-old server in her gumbo-stained white apron. Her notebook of Southern folk tales presses against her hip, a lifeline to her low-country pride, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ache. Lillian's fire in the archive room and her knife-wielding threats burn fresh, but the photo of Maya's great-grandparents, the forged contract, in James's recordings, proof of the Hawthorne land theft, fuel her fire. Her pulse hammers the letter from the hidden safe, sealed with the Hawthorne crest, burning in her pocket. Lillian, 45, stands at the crowd's edge, her black dress a shadow of rage, her hazel eyes blazing. "You're a liar!" she screams, her voice a whip, lunging toward the stage, her nails clawing the air. Maya steps forward, her dark eyes boring into Lillian's, unyielding. "This is my family's truth," she says, her voice thunderous, holding up the ledger, its pages exposing the 1950s theft of her ancestors' land. The crowd gasps, some clutching their pearls, others leaning closer, caught by her fire. James, 30, joins her, his suit torn, his phone in hand, the recording of Lillian's confession. The land deals stay buried, ready to play. "She's right," he says, his voice a growl, cutting through Lillian's advance. "You profited from theft." "You traitor!" Lillian shrieks, her voice cracking, shoving through guests to reach the stage. "You're no Hawthorne!" James hits play, and Lillian's recorded voice blares through the speakers, admitting to hiding the land deals. The crowd murmurs, their faces paling, some turning to Evelyn, 65, who stands frozen, her cream silk dress trembling, her gray eyes wide with shock. "Stop this!" Evelyn snaps, her voice a desperate slash, cutting James off. But he holds up the photo of Maya's great-grandparents, their faces etched with labor on the stolen plot. "This is their land," he says, his tone fierce, his eyes locked on Maya's, a shared vow igniting. "You stole their lives." Maya's chest heaves, her breath hot with rage, her fingers trembling as she pulls the sealed letter from her pocket. She rips it open, her heart slamming against her ribs, and reads aloud, her voice steady. "Evelyn's father, 1955, confessing to forging deeds to seize black families' land." The crowd erupts, whispers turning to shouts, some guests stepping back, others clapping, their loyalty fracturing. Lillian lunges again, her nails grazing Maya's arm, but Maya shoves her back, her elbow sharp, her voice a spark. "You can't silence this," she says, holding the letter high, its ink a blade cutting through the Hawthorne legacy. Lillian stumbles, her face contorted, her teeth grinding, her control shattered. Evelyn steps forward, her hands shaking, her voice a hiss. "Enough!" she screams, but the crowd drowns her out, their eyes on Maya, some nodding, others filming on their phones. "You built your name on our pain," Maya says, her voice breaking but fierce, her notebook's tales urging her on. "Fight for what's yours." James takes her hand, his grip iron, his voice raw. "Maya's my family," he says, his words a gauntlet, his eyes daring the crowd to challenge him. The applause grows, a wave crashing over Lillian's screams, her black dress a fading shadow. Evelyn's face crumples, her gray eyes haunted, her empire unraveling. Maya's pulse steadies, her fingers clutching the ledger, photo, and letter, each a weapon forged from her ancestors' strength. The crowd's cheers swell, a tide turning against the Hawthorns, but Lillian's final glare promises retribution. As Maya steps off the stage, her apron swinging, a server slips her a folded note, its edge marked with a single word, justice. Her heart lurches, sensing a final piece of the puzzle, hidden in the gala's shadows, ready to ignite the last battle. "You're a disgrace!" A guest's voice slices through the gala's stunned silence, aimed at Lillian Hawthorne as she stumbles off the stage, her black dress a crumpled shadow of defeat. Maya Johnson, 27, stands tall, her white apron stained with gumbo, clutching the ledger and photo that exposed the Hawthorne land theft, her ancestors' low-country plot stolen decades ago. Her notebook of Southern folktales presses against her hip, a lifeline to her pride, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ache. The crowd's cheers from moments ago, sparked by James's recording and Maya's fiery words, "You built your name on our pain," still echo, their phones filming, their eyes pinning Lillian. Her pulse hammers, the justice note from a server burning in her pocket, a promise of retribution fulfilled. Lillian's hazel eyes dart, her nails digging into her palms, her voice a desperate hiss. "This is a lie!" she screams, lunging toward Maya, her hands clawing for the ledger. Maya steps back, her dark eyes blazing, her voice thunderous. "It's over," she says, holding the evidence high, its ink a blade cutting through Lillian's lies. James, 30, grabs Lillian's arm, his grip iron, his suit torn from their archive escape. "You're done," he snaps, his voice a growl, cutting her off. "The police have the files." Lillian's face pales, her teeth grinding, her body trembling as two officers step forward, their badges glinting, summoned by a guest call after the stage reveal. "You can't," Lillian shrieks, her voice cracking, but the officers cuff her wrists, her screams fading as they lead her out. The crowd murmurs, some clapping, others turning to Evelyn, 65, who stands frozen, her cream silk dress quivering, her gray eyes hollow. "I didn't know," she mutters, her voice a weak slash, but Maya's gaze cuts through her. "You ignored it," she says, her tone sharp, her heart pounding with the weight of her ancestors' truth. The ledger, photo, and letter, proof of the Hawthorne's theft, are handed to the officers, ensuring restitution for Maya's family and others. Lillian's board position is stripped, her wealth tied to the stolen land frozen, her empire shattered. Maya's chest heaves, her breath steadying, her fingers brushing her notebook, its tails urging her forward. James's hand grazes hers, his eyes fierce with pride. "You did this," he says, his voice low, a vow of solidarity. The crowd's applause swells, their faces shifting from judgment to respect, but Maya's pulse quickens, the justice note a spark in her mind. She glances at Evelyn, whose trembling hands clutch a small key, her eyes darting to a locked drawer nearby, hinting at one last secret that could redefine the Hawthorne legacy. "You think a key fixes your sins?" Maya Johnson's voice cuts like a blade, her words slicing through the fading Gala cheers as she faces Evelyn Hawthorne, whose trembling hand clutches a small brass key. The Hawthorne estate's crowd lingers, their phones still filming, their eyes locked on the 27-year-old server in her gumbo-stained white apron. Her notebook of Southern folktales presses against her hip, a lifeline to her low-country pride, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ache. Lillian's arrest, cuffed for her role in the family's land theft, still echoes, the ledger, photo, and letter, exposing the Hawthorne's theft of Maya's ancestors' land now in police hands. Evelyn, 65, stands frozen, her cream silk dress quivering, her gray eyes haunted by the justice note Maya holds, a spark from the Gala's turning tide. "I'm not my father," Evelyn snaps, her voice a desperate slash, her fingers tightening on the key, cutting Maya off. Her face twists, her breath ragged, the weight of her family's crimes crushing her polished facade. Maya steps closer, her dark eyes blazing, her voice thunderous. "You ignored it," she says, her tone sharp, her heart pounding with her ancestors' pain. "You built your name on stolen ground." Evelyn's lips quiver, her nails digging into her palm, her pulse spiking as the crowd murmurs, some nodding, others shifting, their loyalty fracturing. "I didn't know," she hisses, her voice cracking, but Maya's gaze pierces her. "You chose not to," Maya fires back, her words a spark, her notebook's tales urging her on. Evelyn stumbles toward a locked drawer in the Gala's reception area, her hands shaking as she jams the key in, yanking it open. "I'll fix this," she shouts, her voice a raw plea, pulling out a stack of documents, titles to low-country plots, including Maya's family's land. "I'm giving it back," she says, her tone wavering, thrusting the papers toward Maya. The crowd gasps, their phones capturing every move, some clapping, others whispering. Maya's chest heaves, her breath hot with skepticism, her fingers brushing her notebook, its stories of resilience anchoring her. Words don't erase theft, she says, her voice steady, her eyes daring Evelyn to prove it. James, 30, steps beside her, his suit torn, his hand grazing hers, his voice low. Make it real, he says, his tone fierce, cutting through Evelyn's hesitation. Evelyn's jaw clenches, her teeth grinding, but she grabs a pen, signing the titles over to a trust for low-country families, her signature shaky but deliberate. I'm funding a foundation, she declares, her voice breaking, her eyes meeting Maya's. For your culture, your stories. Maya's pulse skips, her fingers trembling as she takes the papers, her heart racing, her great-grandparents' land, returned after decades. This isn't enough, she says, her voice a vow, her eyes blazing with purpose. You'll work with us. Evelyn nods, her face crumpling, her hands dropping the key, its clatter a surrender. The crowd erupts, applause swelling, some guests stepping forward, offering support, their faces lit with respect. James pulls Maya close, his grip iron, his eyes fierce with pride. You're changing everything, he says, his voice raw, a promise of solidarity. Maya's breath steadies, her fingers clutching the titles, the notebook a burning weight. She remembers a tale her mother told, about a woman who rebuilt a community from ashes, and her resolve hardens. We'll do it together, she says, her tone sharp, her eyes meeting his, a shared fire igniting. Evelyn steps back, her silk dress sagging, her gray eyes hollow but resolute. I'll make it right, she mutters, her voice a faint slash, but Maya's gaze holds her accountable. You'll start now, Maya says, her voice thunderous, pointing to a guest, a local historian, who nods, ready to join the foundation. The crowd's cheers grow, a tide of hope washing over the gala. But Maya's pulse quickens, sensing an unfinished edge. She slips her hand into her apron, pulling out the justice note, its ink stark against the paper. A faint mark catches her eye, a faded seal, matching the hawthorn crest, hinting at one last secret buried in the family's past, waiting to reshape their future. You think signing papers erases your family's crimes? Maya Johnson's voice slices through the fading gala applause, her words a blade aimed at Evelyn Hawthorne, who stands clutching a stack of land titles freshly signed over to a low-country trust. The Hawthorne Estates crowd, Savannah's elite, watches in hushed awe, their phones lowered, eyes locked on the 27-year-old server in her gumbo-stained white apron. Her notebook of Southern folktales presses against her hip, a lifeline to her low-country pride, her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ache. Lillian's arrest for the land theft, Evelyn's foundation to preserve Maya's culture, and the justice note with its faded hawthorn seal burn in her mind, fueling her fire. Her pulse hammers, her dark eyes blazing as she steps forward, refusing to let Evelyn's gesture be the final word. You don't get to decide my worth, Maya says, her voice thunderous, cutting through Evelyn's trembling silence. The matriarch, 65, in her cream silk dress, flinches, her gray eyes hollow, her hands shaking as she grips the titles. I was wrong, Evelyn mutters, her voice a weak slash, trying to interrupt, but Maya's gaze pierces her, unyielding. You built your empire on my family's pain, she fires back, her tone sharp, holding up the justice note, its seal matching the one on the titles. This ends with truth. The crowd murmurs, some nodding, others stepping closer, their tailored suits and pearl necklaces no longer a wall, but a bridge. Evelyn's lips quiver, her nails digging into her palms, her breath ragged. I'm trying, she says, her voice cracking, but Maya's eyes narrow, her heart pounding with her ancestor's strength. Maya pulls her notebook from her apron, its worn pages heavy with tales of resilience, and opens it, her fingers trembling but firm. My mother taught me this, she says, her voice steady, reading aloud a story of a low-country woman who rebuilt a village after betrayal. Her words ring out, each syllable a spark, silencing the crowd, their faces lit with respect. James Hawthorne, 30, stands beside her, his suit torn, his hand grazing hers, his eyes fierce with pride. Keep going, he says, his voice low, cutting through the crowd's hush, a vow of solidarity. Maya's chest heaves, her breath hot with purpose, her mother's tale anchoring her. "This is my legacy," she says, her tone thunderous, holding the notebook high, its pages a banner of her fight. Evelyn steps forward, her hands shaking, and pulls a sealed envelope from her purse, its hawthorn crest matching the justice note. "This is yours," she says, her voice a faint slash, thrusting it toward Maya. "My father's last confession." Maya's pulse spikes, her fingers ripping it open, revealing a letter admitting the full scope of the land theft. Names, dates, bribes that stole her great-grandparents' plot. "You knew," Maya says, her voice breaking but fierce, her eyes boring into Evelyn's. The matriarch's face crumples, her teeth grinding, but she nods, her voice barely audible. "I failed them," she says, her hands dropping, a surrender to the truth. The crowd gasps, some clapping, others filming, their applause swelling into a tide of support. Maya's heart steadies, her fingers clutching the letter, notebook, and photo, each a weapon forged from her ancestors' pain. "This isn't just for me," she says, her voice a vow, turning to the crowd. "It's for every family you erased." She pulls a pinch of low-country soil from her pocket, a ritual her mother taught, and scatters it on the ground, her apron swinging, her eyes blazing with purpose. The crowd roars, their cheers a wave crashing over Evelyn's fading reign. James takes her hand, his grip iron, his voice raw. "We'll build something new," he says, his eyes locked on hers, a promise of a future together. Maya nods, her breath steadying, her notebook's tales urging her forward. "Your story is your power." A local historian, the one who aided their investigation, steps up, her sharp eyes glinting. "I'll join your foundation," she says, her voice firm, handing Maya a digital archive of Low Country stories. "Let's tell them all." Maya's pulse quickens, her fingers trembling as she takes it, sensing a community rising. Evelyn, her silk dress sagging, approaches, her hands empty but outstretched. "I'll fund it," she says, her voice a quiet slash, her eyes meeting Maya's with newfound humility. "For you." Maya's jaw clenches, her teeth pulsing, but she nods, her voice sharp. "For us all," she says, her tone a spark, sealing the pact. The crowd parts, their faces alight with hope, as Maya steps toward a small stage, her apron a banner, her notebook open. She reads another tale, her voice thunderous, weaving her ancestors' strength into Savannah's future. James stands beside her, his hand steadying hers, their bond a fire no theft could douse. Evelyn lingers at the crowd's edge, her gray eyes soft, her hands clasped, a shadow of redemption. The Gala transforms, no longer a cage but a canvas, its walls echoing Maya's stories. She scatters the last of the soil, its grains a constellation on the ground, her heart swelling with possibility. The crowd's cheers fade, but a single voice, a child's, calls out, "Tell another." Maya smiles, her eyes blazing, her notebook a beacon, promising a legacy that will outlast the Hawthorne's shame. Maya Johnson's journey teaches us that resilience and pride in one's heritage can shatter prejudice, forging a path to justice and unity. Her fight against the Hawthorne's legacy of theft proves that truth, wielded with courage, can rebuild communities and redefine families. What did Maya's story stir in you? Share your thoughts or your own tales of standing tall in the comments below. Your voice matters. Thank you for joining us on this powerful ride. Stay bold, and we'll see you in the next story.